everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 49 of the Circles and Squares PlayStation Podcast. One away from the Big 5-0, Kate. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think we realized actually this morning that it was one away from 50. We're like, holy shit.
We're like, oh my god, we gotta plan something.
Yeah. So anyway, good things are coming, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, it will be a big, exciting episode next time. What will it be? We're not exactly sure yet ourselves, so you're going to have to listen and find out.
I prefer the word surprise. It's a surprise for everyone involved.
We like surprises, and we're going to keep it that way for ourselves probably as long as possible. Plan it out, 2 days before, and we'll see how it goes. But anyway, maybe a little bit more ahead of that. But Kate, how are you? You're in your new place. Welcome to your new home.
Officially in my new place. For those of you video watchers, I promise I intend to clean it up at some point. But it's been a couple days. I'm doing the box thing. So
yep. Making sure you had the right TV there.
Exactly. Yeah, make sure the right TV. You never know. Things look a little different when they're put in different places. Look forward to the bookshelf just sort of filling up in the background. That'll be a fun game.
Every episode, there's like 2 or 3 different new things in there. What could it be this time? Who knows? It'll be like Phil Spencer leaving little clues behind him in the press conferences.
That's right. They'll be like, "Oh my god, the spine of that book was orange. It's a new Crash Bandicoot."
That's perfect. Yeah. All right, Kate. Well, let's get into talking about some games for today. Of course, that's what we like to start the show off with every single time. So we're going to start off by the first half of the show talking about what we've been playing the last couple of weeks. And then the second half of the show, just because we still are in the early parts of 2022, we thought we'd just go through some of the games we know are supposed to be releasing this year and talk about the games we're most excited for and what we're looking forward to playing throughout the year. Because we got a lot of good stuff coming out, so we got to take a chance and talk about where we're at with that. And just a reminder to everyone before we get going that we really, really need some new listener mail questions. We're digging deep into the mailbag. We've answered a lot. We're back on answering one every single show, but we're running low. So if you have any questions for us, or you want to ask us some trivia, or tell us a story about a game we talked about on the show, really anything you want to write in about, just send those questions to circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com, or reply to our thread on Twitter as well. And we will get to that on one of the upcoming shows, and we look forward to those messages every time we get them. So please go ahead and do that. But for now, Kate, let's talk about the games we've been playing. I'd like to go first because I have an update on something that I told you about a couple episodes ago, which was I finally beat the behemoth RPG that is Dragon Quest XI. I think I clocked in at like 60 hours or so. It's hard to tell because I had so much of that idle time. My file was like, 200 hours, but I think it's because I had it on pause for so long. So I hope I didn't play for that long. But anyway, last time I was telling you about how I think it was like a really interesting kind of generic RPG, right? Like it's Dragon Quest. It's the same. You're going to have like the types, like the different elemental spells, and the level up system is like a nice little sphere grid kind of thing. You can really build your characters very flexibly. And the game itself, like one of the best things I liked about it is it's one where there's no random battles. They are like overworld encounters. And I continued to think that all the way through. One of the things I have mostly positives to say about this game, but I mean, I complained about the music last time. The music is just unbearable in this game. It's not that it's all bad music. Some of the music is like, oh man, this is kind of off-putting. Like some of the boss themes are just they sound out of tune almost. But the music itself is just so repetitive. There's only like 6 or 7 main songs, and you hear them all the way through, and it never really changes. You get to one area near the end, and there is some new music, and it's actually kind of cool and creepy because you're in this kind of like evil lair. And then what happens? It just it fades back out into the main theme. And it's like, what are you doing? It
teases you a little bit.
Oh,
it's
it
like,
does.
Oh, but hang on.
It does.
I've got to ask too, is the music just static? Because I've been playing a lot of, I hopped back into Hades for a couple runs the other day. And I know Hades is not a fair bar to judge everything else on because it's just one of the most polished games of all time. But that has that dynamic, orchestra, like the score is dynamic, so like depending on how well you're doing and how like intense the room is, it'll actually like adjust based off of your gameplay. So it's not just like a set track that just goes. It does dynamically change, and I feel like that's kind of like it's the new thing we're seeing in a lot of games, and it almost kind of like spoils just those set tracks that you hear on repeat over and over again.
I think that's a really apt comparison because I think it's like the nature of this game being an RPG, right? Like it's one of those ones where the battle screen kind of fades in, like it cuts to the battle screen, then there's the exploration music, like any classic Pokemon or Final Fantasy or whatever it is. So it doesn't really have those dynamic tracks. It's more like this is a boss fight, so here's the here's the boss theme or whatever. But regardless of that, like the music is just such a small part, and by the end of it it almost became like a meme. Like it was funny when the same music came back on. And I was just I was just getting through it because I enjoyed so much of the game. Other than that, like I really enjoyed the story. Was more twisty and turny than I expected. Like it is still a fairly paint by the numbers kind of JRPG story. But there was some interesting parts. There was like a few character deaths that I didn't anticipate, and some cool things that happen with like characters that join your party or leave your party and whatnot. So that kind of thing is always what really I'm a sucker for in a lot of RPGs, like how your party comes together. And it's not only like the characters kind of coming in and out, but what I also really loved, and I talked about a bit, was like the level up system is really flexible in that every character has maybe two to three, or some of them have maybe 4 different weapons and paths. You can kind of build them out, and one can use like whips or swords or spears, and they all have different abilities. So just sort of choosing like how you're going to build that out and what characters you're going to give what weapons is fun. Like that's the kind of thing I really enjoy for these games, like the team building aspect.
Yeah.
And so it was just a great experience that way. And one thing I think I neglected to talk about last time, which may be my favorite mechanic in this game, is the crafting system. And I don't really care for a lot of crafting. I know like it's a huge mechanic in a lot of games now, but it's hard when that's like to find a game where that's really a standout. It's usually something you do sort of in the background. Or
that's exactly what I thought when you mentioned it. I was like, I don't think I've ever once heard a game that like, what stands out here is the crafting system, especially if it's not like a survival game, right?
Yeah.
It's just, like you said, just something that you just typically know that you do because that's the reward for exploring and finding that extra chest is you get a crafting whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. No, this game does it really, really well. Like you get an item pretty early on called the Fun Size Forge, and it's like a mobile forging thing. It's like a little mini game you play, and you basically have like a shield could be like a circular. It's a circular item, so it's kind of like you'll have a 2x2 block, and with a corner of the shield in each one, and you'll have to use like your hammer to bash it in certain ways to kind of forge it like you would on a blacksmith. What's it called? An anvil. And they get more complicated. Like you get different kinds of hits. Like you, I guess you spend like MP points on doing different sorts of hits on it, and you have to make it as best you can up to these meters. It's a really good system, and you're rewarded for making a higher precision item by getting the secondary currency, which then you can use to rework items you already have and make them even better. So you're constantly in this feedback loop of like, oh, I can now craft some new material. So I'll go build this new armor, then I'll upgrade it with the stuff that you get from that. And then you're building new stuff, upgrading that. And it's just this great feedback loop of that reinforces itself, on top of the fact that you can also buy all the materials you need right from that menu. You don't actually have to go find them in the overworld if you don't want. You can just pay a premium to get them, and you end up having so much money that you can just do it. And it really streamlines the whole thing. And I spent like quite a bit of time just sitting in that menu, sort of powering up through making my gear better, not so much even having to grind against enemies.
Okay. That sounds like such nice quality of life, especially for like a long JRPG, and like when you've got multiple characters you're wanting to kit out. Like it's one thing when you're playing like whatever, like Dark Souls, you're like, oh, I want to get this, like, oh, I got a new shield, and like, okay, I'm gonna use my new shield, and that's exciting, and like I found it, and I wasn't necessarily expecting to get it. Now it's like, like those certain games, like loot's exciting to find, but in other games it's like, no, you just want to have what you want to have because like you don't want to do that for 7 different characters, and it like becomes this massive grind.
Right. I think it becomes like in a game like Zelda or like I guess Skyrim, where you're just one character and you're doing your upgrades for yourself, it's different. But when you're managing a party like that, you want it to be streamlined and like you can just equip what you want. And so I really appreciated that about this game for sure. And like you say, convenience as well, like time saver. It totally was. Like you didn't have to grind for those. The game also does things like you can ride a horse around pretty early to move quicker. But you used to have to do it by ringing a bell outside of a town. But quite early on, again, you get this item called the Horse Hailer, where you can just literally transport a horse right to you and ride it wherever you want. And it's just very, very easy. Same thing. Eventually, you get like a flying ability to fly in the air. You can just call that thing from wherever you want. You don't have to go to like an airport or a certain area to get it. And
I'm just picturing like an actual airport.
Yeah.
in that world, it does not fit.
Yeah, no, not quite. But you know, like it's just stuff like that that not all games
Yeah.
do, especially all like RPGs like this. Sometimes they have some finicky, like, no, you can only, equip items if you go to this certain dresser in your hideout or something,
Yeah,
and it's very
exactly.
flexible.
Yeah, the what was it? The quintessential oak line? It's like, you can't use that here. It's like,
Yeah,
oh
exactly.
man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool though. Like you also the last thing I wanted to mention was there's some light overworld type of puzzles in certain ones of the dungeons in terms of like you can actually ride certain enemies around as well. So outside of battle, if you defeat them, then you can basically take their power for a little bit. Like it'll be like enemies like there's these guys that ride dragons around, and so you kill the guy on the back and then the dragon's just kind of flapping there and you can actually ride it and like find secret areas to explore in different maps. Or
cool.
There's another one that's like a spider and you can climb up the walls. Just little traversal stuff like that kind of spices up the otherwise you're just kind of running through corridors, right? Makes it a little bit more interesting.
That is incredibly cool.
So anyway, after playing this, I now have like a weird craving to watch Dragon Ball Z because it's the same art director.
Right, it's the exact same artist. And it's not like he like changed up his style. Like it is the exact same as Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, 100%. There's a boss that looks just like Frieza like later on. Just kind of like a more aggressive version. So it's interesting, but yeah, it's a cool game. I would definitely recommend anyone check this out. Like if you have Game Pass and you can just play it, or it goes on sale pretty often on like PlayStation and Switch also, but it's a really cool game. And I would say if you're kind of new to playing RPGs, it's a really good one to get in there because it doesn't require a lot of grinding. You can save easily, good checkpoints, like fun level ups. Yeah.
I'm sorry, how many hours did you say it took you to beat?
I think it took me probably about 60 hours if I had to guess.
Okay.
I know How Long to Beat has it at 55.
Okay, and that's not bad because I find with those kind of games, it's always the length that's the most intimidating part. And like, it's fun getting into the world and meeting the characters and learning the systems. And then I play for about like 30 hours and it's just this massive, long, grindy game reaching out in front of me and I just fall off. But this seems like the kind of one where it's like, it might actually not, like, might be plausible for me to beat it without it being like a game I dedicate tons of time to. Like, occasionally, like a Persona 5 will come along and it's like, fine, I put 120 hours into that game and I beat it, whatever. But the vast majority of games are not going to be Persona 5s for me.
No, exactly. They become, and there's a certain point too, you always hit in those games where it's like, okay, I put 45 hours into this. I feel like I'm not making a lot of progress. And then you hit a hard boss and it's like, I'm probably going to have to grind up 5 or 6 levels and you just don't feel like doing it and you just put it down.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know what? I've kind of gotten what I feel like I can get out of this game. I might as well just play something else because especially when you hit that grinding wall, like that's like, you're not respecting my time anymore. I've already given you like 7 months of my life.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to move on.
Exactly. No, this is definitely good for that. And I think they do it in a good way too, because I know there's I've kind of read through some forums on this game and just, a couple tips and, what I might have missed. And I know from reading that there's a pretty extensive post game apparently. And people are probably going to say, hey, James, you didn't actually beat the game because there's a real final true boss after the credits and whatever. And it's like, I like that challenge is in there because apparently it does get quite a bit harder and like you have to pretty much max your characters out and do that type of shit that people really like in these RPGs. And it's like, that's usually not what I come for. And I'm glad that that's kind of locked after the post game and that the main story up to the credits is more, I wouldn't say it's always easy, but you don't have to grind and really put in that extra laborious work that sometimes you do in these games. So I'm glad to see that. But yeah, Dragon Quest is really cool. You should check it out and play it. And
I think I played the demo actually. Now that I think about it, I think I played the demo and I actually like kind of got into it. You know what's funny is I remember the demo being like, this music's kind of a bop. And maybe it is for, like,
it's not bad. It's just you'll see what I mean if you play. Yeah. If you play. But I had one other game I wanted to tell you about before I hear about your interesting adventure you've been having. So let me tell you about Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze because this is a game that came out in 2016, I think.
Yeah, it was for the Wii U.
For the Wii U, I think.
The Wii.
I think it was on the Wii U. It was not on the Wii. It wasn't on the Wii. They had Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii.
Right, okay.
But this is Tropical Freeze. So this is basically the same thing as that. It's like the old school side scroller Donkey Kong, and the I guess interesting factor of this one is that the tropical island that he lives on has been invaded by a giant evil I think he's a polar bear, maybe he's a walrus. Either way, he's got like a big ice gun and like
those are not animals. Well,
it's a big snowy animal, okay?
Okay, right, but like, does it have legs?
Yes, it has legs. It has legs.
Okay,
I believe it's a walrus. I believe it's a walrus because later on there's like some moves he does. Anyway, he freezes the island, hence the tropical freeze.
Right.
And you're kind of going through these levels and defrosting the island and taking out all his minions. They're kind of themed after Vikings, and they have this whole story kind of going on. But that's not why people come to Donkey Kong, right? It's for the gameplay and the relative, I guess, the challenge. These games are known for being pretty challenging, the Donkey Kong games. And this one I don't think is any exception. It is tough for sure. There's good checkpoints. I think it's more than doable, but it's definitely not like, playing a Mario side-scroller with some of the easier levels in there. I know there's some tough stuff in Mario too, but in general, I'd say this is kind of, a lot more intricate. And the thing I really like about it, and I always forget this about Donkey Kong, and I'm sure you can identify this too, Kate, is just the amount of momentum you can build up when you're sort of rolling through and you hit those like on top of the enemy's heads, and you can keep rolling. You can actually get a lot of speed if you know what you're doing. And you get that feeling in this game pretty often. It gives you lots of opportunities to do that. And I just feel like this game, although you die a lot, you need to redo portions, it just makes you feel like such a master when you get these levels right. I love it. And I don't know if you've seen much gameplay of it, but like, do you have any impressions of it?
I've seen a little bit. It's always one of those games that's been on my list to play. Like, I adore the old Donkey Kong Country, especially 2. Is when I've played a few times with different people. I've always played them co-op.
Yeah. And I played this single player, so.
Yeah, and I always enjoyed that that's an aspect. And like you said, they get hard. Donkey Kong Country 2 is like an amazing soundtrack as well.
Oh, this one too. It's awesome.
Good, okay. Because I just adore those games. And I've always intended to go around and beat that, but just not really for playing much Wii U. I never picked it up. But it's definitely on my list of a game to play. And it's one of those series that I have so highly acclaimed in my mind, but have played like an embarrassingly low amount of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, this game's been out for so long. I only just picked it up last month. But, like the thing that I also love about it too is like the old ones had that great style, that was very classic, like Super Nintendo kind of look. And this game too, I feel like they've really brought that into the modern setting. Like the theming of these worlds is really great. I kind of find that like Donkey Kong, like Diddy Kong, they're a little bit too humanoid, and like something about their bodies is like a little off-putting to me in a weird way. But the environments, I'm kind of joking with that, but kind of serious. But the environments are super cool. Like they're the same Donkey Kong stuff like with the jungle and the vines and the different stuff. But they've added the ability in these newer games to grab onto stuff, so you can grab like I guess they'd be like branches and stuff ahead of you, or like there's like moss that grows on the sides of certain walls, so you can climb up of it, and it just adds this element to the regular like jump on guys' heads and the rolling stuff that they had in the older games. And it's just really, really fun to traverse. And the levels themselves, they have this theming that progresses. Like one of the levels in this game, they're kind of separated into islands, and they're like subdivided into like island 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, right? Like the different areas. And the theming throughout the levels is just so continuous. Like you'll start on a tropical island. There's kind of like fruit trees outside, and then in the next level on, you're at the juice factory, and then the next level on, it's like you're outside the other side of the factory, and there's like these bouncy juice cubes that you use just for that level, and you can bounce on them. But it doesn't recur, and they don't overuse it, and then they change it up again the next level, and then those cubes are frozen, so you can't bounce anymore, but now you can just jump on them like platforms. And these threads just go through the whole game and make it feel really cohesive, unlike other games where it's kind of just like, okay, how are we going to design this level, and then what's sort of the aesthetic we're going to put on it, Whereas this, they've thought out like, what would a Donkey Kong juice factory look like? How could we build a level and like theme that, It really feels like they built it out really intentionally. And I think that's what this game is. It's just such a polished version of like those tricky platformers.
That is really exciting. You've sold me on this. I was actually sitting when I was moving, and I was setting up my entertainment stand with apparently it's my TV. And I was putting, like the games on the shelf and everything, and I put on my copy of my Crash remaster.
Oh yeah.
And I was thinking, what, I really want to get back into it. I feel like I could go for a platformer for whatever reason. Like they're not games I play all the time. Like I loved Odyssey And I definitely play them from time to time, but they're one of those, like, when I'm in the mood for kind of games.
Mhm.
And I saw the Crash and I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm in the mood, like, I could play some Crash." But now I'm thinking Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, it's on Switch, right? I'm
It
assuming
is,
that's
it
how you
is. I
play
can
it?
lend it to you if you want. It's
Ooh,
very
that would be
appealing, you
amazing
know?
because
Yeah.
it has a pretty big price tag, I
It's still
believe,
full price, right? Like I got it
right?
on a discount, but it is still like you got to pay for it, right? It's Nintendo and that's just the way it
Mhm.
is and it's kind of frustrating sometimes, but you know, you bite the bullet and I honestly feel like it was worth it. Like this is a great game, right? It's just
Yeah.
you can't buy too many games at that price if you're a lot of people, and so you got to
Yeah.
pick and choose. And so, I mean, yeah, could I have fun with something else? Sure, but this is a great game as well, which I would highly recommend. There's a
Okay.
couple weird things like there's now 3 partners you can get. Like you know you can break Diddy out of the barrel and kind of have 2, and
Mhm.
there's like Dixie in some of the older games as well. And
Yeah.
this game you can also get Cranky, and I don't know if that's something that was also in any of the ones before this, but you can get Cranky, and it's just they all have like different abilities. Like
Yeah.
with Diddy, you get the jetpack. Dixie has like this jump where she kind of goes down and then flutters up.
Yeah, she kind of has, like, a
Yeah,
hair sort of, like, helicopters her a
yeah,
little bit, at least in the old games, that's
that's
what it
right, that's
did.
right. And then Cranky, you can bounce on his cane, so you can bounce on like spiky pits and stuff, which is very
Okay.
useful in certain parts. But by and large, like Dixie is just so far and away the best one because she's essentially like extra height, and
Whoa,
it's
whoa,
just
whoa,
lets you
no,
get up.
slow down, she's not the best
Yeah,
one.
she is.
You don't remember Funky Kong?
Okay, well, true,
This is
true, true.
that game, right?
It is that game. I didn't play with Funky
Yeah.
Kong though. I didn't play
Oh,
that.
you didn't play in Funky mode?
No, well, you know what? I did play in Funky mode. I didn't play with Funky Kong, and I'll tell you why. Is because the last thing I was going to talk about is the achievements, and the thing about
Mhm.
Funky mode is that it lets you, if you die in a level, you keep the collectibles that you found, so you don't
Okay.
have to recollect like all the Kong and like all that stuff. And you know what?
Right.
It's like the kind of thing where it's like, I don't think I would ever have the patience to do that, like
Mhm.
go through all the levels. They're hard enough, right? And some of those
Yeah.
things are hard to get. But if I ever wanted a chance at going for like any kind of 100% or like unlocking theirs, I know there's levels that are locked by like certain collectibles later on. It's like I'm gonna have to play it in this mode so I can at least go back and get just the ones I missed, you know. And so that's
Oh,
kind of the
okay.
way that I took it.
So is that like an in between? Because I know like Funky Kong is just he just surfs through the
Well,
level.
you
He
don't.
doesn't give a fuck, right? He just
No,
surfs
he
through.
doesn't.
He's
He
gone.
doesn't.
He's like, "Woo, see you later, losers."
I should have probably
And off
checked
he
into
goes.
that, to be honest with you. I didn't look into it
I
because when you
I
start the game, right? Like what happens
Mhm.
is you pick the mode. You can't change which mode you're in. So I played. The
Okay.
other difference with Funky mode is I got 3 hearts instead of 2 hearts, so I had a little bit more health. So take it for what it
Right.
was. I'm sure the game would be even more challenging with only 2. But then again, most of my deaths are like falling off the edge anyway, which I don't think
Mhm.
it saves you. But anyway, Funky mode, you pick which character you want. So you can choose DK or Funky. I didn't actually try Funky, so
Oh,
maybe I
okay.
should for next time and see what it's
Okay.
like.
See, I thought it was like one or the other. I thought there was
Yeah.
just like baby mode or here's the game. But I actually like that there's that in between of like, a little bit of quality of life if you want to just have a little bit of like it's more room for error, right? Like I want to
Mhm.
play as
Mhm.
the main characters because that's how I feel like the platforming is designed around. And like that's where the challenge is and I want it to be hard. But like you said, like, okay, if you get the Kong and then you die and then like maybe you don't have to go grab that
Right,
cave
right,
like the
right.
second time. And it's like I know I can do it because I did it, but it's just a little bit of like
Well, this is the evolution of
gets you
like
through a
what
bit
this.
quicker.
Yeah, this is the evolution of what this is, right? Because there's people
Yeah.
that would like you, that you want the challenge of it all. You would rather have the collectibles that way, but then not the health. And it's like one of those things where they've tried to do this mode, but it's obviously not put in perfectly because you should be able to check exactly which of the things you want. And I think that's one of those things. Is like hopefully it just becomes more like that,
Yeah.
in the next
I
version.
I
I
like that at
guess.
least, like, there are some levels of it, though.
Hmm.
Like, you
Hmm.
don't have to play Funky Boy if you're
Right.
in Funky
Yeah.
mode. Like, I think I'd probably do what you would do, to be honest, is
Yeah.
that kind of like it's like with Crash sometimes playing the old ones, it's like, "Yeah, this is great, but, like, I just kinda wish I had infinite lives sometimes," because,
Oh man.
like, I'm at this checkpoint, I know I can do it, I'm at the last checkpoint in this level, but, like, "Oh god, I died here, I gotta do the whole thing again," and, like, I
Yeah.
understand that longevity is part of the challenge of it, but I know I can do the first 3/3 because I've done it 6
And that's how I
times.
feel about Souls game
Yeah.
runbacks.
Oh.
Um, Anyways, let's move along to what you've been playing, which
Okay.
is very interesting, and I'd like to hear about it. So please tell me
Good.
about
Distract me
Melty
from
Snow,
going
Warm Snow.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The game, if you would like to find it outside of this podcast, it is called Warm Snow. In my world, it's called Melty Snow. I don't know. We just made the joke like what is warm snow? Like water. And then we're like, well, maybe it's still melting. And so we kind of joked around
At
it.
least it's not wet snow.
At least it's not wet snow. Anyway, so it's just kind of that's the name of it in my mind is Melty Snow. This game is bizarre. And I have the weirdest pitch for this game ever for you. But okay. Let's say that
Interested to hear it.
Hades is the equivalent of like when you play an RPG and the damage numbers are like the boss has 100 health and you do like 5 damage a hit.
Oh god.
Warm Snow is the equivalent of like the boss has like 2 billion health and you do like 50,000 damage a hit. And everything's just kind of like
big numbers.
It's the same, but it's just so inflated and bombastic and crazy. And so that's how it feels to me. Basically Warm Snow, Melty Snow, whatever you want to call it, is Chinese Hades.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome.
Do you know who the developer is?
I'm having a blast.
Interested.
Yes, I do. It is it comes up what is it in English? It's Bad Mud Studio is the developer.
Okay.
So I've never seen anything by them. I haven't really been able to find tons of information on them. They are definitely not an English developer. And this may or may not be their first big game, but they've genuinely done a really good job. So it's the same kind of a format as Hades where like you kind of go through these they're separated into scrolls, but it's basically like the same idea as like the layers of hell where you go through the area and you get to a boss at the end and it takes you to the next area and it's always the same areas every time.
In order.
Until eventually until eventually you make it to the final boss, you beat him. And then what's cool about this game is like Hades does that heat. And I won't spoil too much, but Hades is the heat when you finally beat it where it's those like optional difficulties you can keep adding on to increase the heat level of the run. This game has various other like there various modes. They're not as flexible as heat where you don't get to choose the individual things that you're boosting up, but it's basically like, okay, here's the game again, but here's these 7 different aspects that are going to make it harder. And then you beat that and like, okay, now you've unlocked the next level of snow that's 7 different things harder. But it took a while to beat the initial game. Like it is not easy.
Yeah, like how long is a run?
I mean, you start to get a hell of a lot quicker once you're decent, but I'd say it's about Hades length. It can take you anywhere from like half an hour to an hour, probably closer to that half hour range, 40-minute range once you kind of know what you're doing. But the main difference between it, so it plays pretty similar. You only have one weapon. It's not like Hades where you choose your weapon at the start and you go in.
Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad.
But what you do choose at the start is you choose like which god you're going to worship. And each god has 2 different options and those change things drastically. So your base kind of attacks that you've got are you have a sword that does like kind of a 3-hit combo. And then you've got these flying knives that you shoot out and then on a cooldown, you can recall them. So they'll do damage when they shoot out, and then they'll do damage on the recall as well. And so it's kind of like the bread and butter of like what you have at your disposal. But then some of the gods drastically change that. So like there's one god that's all ranged, like you don't do melee stuff. And then there's another god where my 2 personal favorites are there's this one lightning god you can go for, and he can remove there is a lightning god where you have the range and have melee, and then there's an aspect where it takes away all of your range, but it gives you like all this like passive AoE lightning damage. So like
so you're just dodging.
So it's not necessarily just dodging, but like when you dash through something, it'll do lightning damage. And instead of your recall now bringing your swords back, it like puts you basically into this like god electric mode. And it's really cool how it changes how much you have to approach situations. So I guess it's a similar kind of variety in terms of the weapons, but it's made through this choice at the beginning.
See, so it seems like you have more influence on what exactly you get then, because you're basically choosing just one god and then one of the 2 things they pick. Like that, to me, that seems like you're getting a little bit more influence on like how you will build.
It's kind of like a double-edged sword in that way. Like it is and it isn't. And I think it's impossible to not think about Hades whenever you play this game because, like, Hades sort of created
Hmm.
this style of roguelike. It was so big, and I think it really, like, carved out a strong niche for itself. And we've
Yeah.
seen a couple games since that are really, like, doing the Hades thing, and this is by far, I think, the most similar game. So you have a lot of control in terms of, like, you pick your god, and then everything you wanna do based off of that is that god. So you get as you progress the other ways you get better, you get relics, and you have 4 different slots for relics. And this is one of my favorite things about the game is when you pick one up, there'll be, like, a reward at the end of the room where you can buy it in a shop. Kind of similar to, like, how Hades you go in, you're like, "Oh, this is the room for, like, a boon," or, "This is a room for, like, health," or, like, currency
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
whatever. This does the same kind of thing, you get to usually choose between 2 different rooms. And so if you get one of these relics, they all have a set thing that they do or that they buff, but then you have 4 slots, and depending on what slot you put it into, it has a slightly different effect.
Oh, I see. So you can have kind of can you switch those around once you put them in
And
as well?
switch
You
them
can.
around anytime. So I really like that in terms of flexibility. So it's like, oh, we got this relic that's usually like, it does if you put it in this one spot, then it does like ice damage when you dodge. If you put it in another slot, then it gives you like an ice shield. And if you put it in this other slot, like it just buffs your ice damage in general. And so like you really have a lot of customization on where you choose to put them. But I feel like there's less ability for you to choose what ones you come across.
Yeah, that's what I
If
was
that
talking
makes
about
sense,
before.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, in Hades, you have a lot of tools, especially once you get later in the game for, like, re-rolling what you run into. It's like, "I really wanna find this god." There's ways for you to, like, ensure that you do find that god, and if you really wanna get a certain upgrade from them, you can, like, "Oh, it's not there, I'll re-roll and get it a second time." So, you have a little bit more agency over that stuff where in Warm Snow, it feels like you have a lot of agency on, "I want to do a lightning run. Here it is, my lightning run for
Right,
sure.
right, right.
Half the stuff I get is gonna be about lightning, it's gonna be awesome." But if there is a certain relic you want, you're just kinda luck of the draw. So sometimes it feels really shitty when you're like, "I picked the lightning god, but I haven't found a single lightning relic." Like,
Right. Yeah,
ugh.
yeah. You're like, oh, I wanted to play this certain way, and now you can't. It's like if your run kind of gets screwed up partway through, you can't really do as much as you could in Hades to correct it and kind of
Yeah.
salvage it, right?
And and to be fair, that might be something that gets unlocked later. Like, I have beaten the game once, technically, like, beaten the final boss, but I still have a lot of skill trees to upgrade, and I still have, like, those extra difficulty settings to unlock, so
Hmm.
I've got things I need to go along and do, and to be fair, you don't necessarily start out in Hades with a lot of agency over those things, you have to kind of
That's
unlock
true.
them
That's true.
as you go, so it might have an aspect of that, but my gut instinct is telling me it's a little bit more RNG.
Hmm.
But at the same time, everything seems, like, weirdly overpowered, so maybe it's okay whatever you end up with. Um, the other thing I think is cool is you collect swords as you go. So you always use a sword. It's always the same 3-hit combo. That doesn't change. But you get these swords and they'll have like various attributes on them. So it'll be like, oh, if something's poisoned, do 20% extra damage to them. Or like, oh, your movement speed is just increased by 10%. So they just have like attributes that are randomized to the weapon. But then each weapon has a set effect they always have, and they relate to the relics, which is neat. So it'll say like if you have this herb relic in your first slot, then you get this bonus as well.
Right.
And so like you have to kind of it's hard to do to mix and match that sword to the relics because again, you don't have tons of ways to put them together, but when you do it feels so cool and you can really come up with some very creative and interesting builds. It's just hard to do it.
Right. But I guess when you do, you're gonna feel good, right? At
Yeah,
least.
and it's good. So, anyway, the combat feels good. Very it's not as polished as Hades, but again, nothing is, so that's kind of unfair. But it feels good. It's got a lot of interesting enemy variety. The bosses I particularly appreciate because there's multiple bosses for each area.
Hmm.
So you don't always fight the same boss every single time, which kind of makes it nice when you're just kind of rerunning the same place over and
Yeah,
over again.
that's one of the few areas I would say Hades could have improved on. Like I know maybe you could argue there is a few different bosses in certain area, but more or less you're fighting a lot of the same bosses for the vast majority of the time, and it is kind of like, oh my god, especially if there's one you don't really enjoy the fight of as much. So that's really good to hear that they
Mhm.
might have actually found at least one way that they could do the Hades thing a little better.
Yeah. Yeah, so I do appreciate that, and it's just random, like, and even if it's just between 1 or 2 options, at least sometimes just having that variety is quite nice and helpful. I don't believe so far that the final boss has variety, but
That
I
kind of
feel like
makes
maybe
sense
with
though.
yeah, but I also feel like maybe with the difficulties that might change. Um, and so we'll see. I've got a lot to do. I might do an update. I plan on kind of beating this
Yeah.
game, but then at the same time, it's also making me just want to go finish Hades because I have 4 achievements left and like, oh, I'm so close.
I was going to ask you how long you think you see yourself playing this. Like, I know for Hades, you had quite a long tail on it. Like, you'll probably go back to it eventually, right? And so I wonder, like, is this
Yeah.
going to hold your attention for a long time, or is it just sort of a nice diversion for a couple weeks?
I feel like it's a nice diversion. I feel like with this style of game, I would recommend Hades 10 out of 10 times. I think I would recommend this game if you really like Hades and want more of something similar. Then this is a great way to kind of get back into that style of game if you sort of gotten what you want to get out of Hades. Um, I think the combat is almost as fun. I think the builds are really interesting. It is really fun to unlock some stuff. I like the world a lot in this, and I don't even know too much about it because the translation is questionable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's just inconsistent. Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's a little rough. And so, like for example, the first boss has English subtitles, so you can't understand what they're if you only speak English, you can read those subtitles and it's fine. You get to the second boss, and there's subtitles, but they're not in English. And so they
So
talk
that's
to you, and you're like,
interesting.
"Okay, that's kinda weird." You get to the 3rd boss, and there isn't even subtitles.
It's a work in progress
So,
then.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
kind of I mean, this game came out, like, 4 weeks ago at most. Like, it's just come out. So I'm sure they'll be doing some balance patches and adding in some new translation things. But the story at least is really interesting. You're kind of in this old empire, and the snow it's snowing a lot, and it turns out the snow is actually it's like a pollen of some kind. It's coming out of this flower, and it's actually a pollen, it's not snow, and it's basically turning people into monsters who are, like,
That's
losing
frightening.
control of themselves, but it's really cool, so I mean, maybe that's more obvious, if you can understand
Yeah.
everything the game's telling you. But it was kind of a cool reveal as I got closer and closer, and as you get closer to the final boss and you're working your way through these scroll areas, like, there's just more snow, more corpses, like, it gets
It gets
really
dark,
dark,
right?
like, by the end, I'm like, "Am I playing Bloodborne? Like, this is fucked up."
This is a little too
So,
much.
I really enjoy the aesthetic. I think there's a lot of creativity in this game, and I hope that they kind of keep iterating on it because there's a lot of really smart ideas, and I think it's a blessing and a curse that it is just Chinese style Hades
Mhm,
because on
mhm.
one way, like, it's you know what you're getting into. I think that's a big draw. Like, this is the reason I started playing, right? Is because I love Hades. But it is also that elephant of the room where, like, if this game is like a high B tier or like an low A tier, Hades is S tier. So you
Yeah,
can't get
yeah.
away from that comparison.
True. I think it's one of those things, like you said, though. Like, if you liked Hades, just play this. Like, if you really boil it down, there's really only so many different types of games. Like a lot of games
Mhm.
are variations on each other. So it's cool to know that there's other guys out there making, I should say, yeah, like making something similar to Hades, right? Like you
Mhm.
can find extra if you're one of those people that has completed everything. Then yeah, why not? It sounds like a cool
Mhm.
game.
Yeah, exactly. So I would highly recommend it, and I would also highly recommend going back and beating Hades because holy shit,
Yeah,
did I played one run last night and I was like, I'm back on the
I
Hades
gotta
train.
complete those too. I think I've only done like 5 completions, so I got a few more
Oh,
to do. It's
there's
not
so
enough.
much left.
It's
There's
not
so
enough.
much left to do.
Man, okay. Well, check in if you play some more Hades. I would like to hear what happens when you get to all of them. So let me know.
Mhm.
But Kate, let's transition to the second half of today's show, where we're going to be talking about more games. But this time, instead of games we've played, we're going to talk about games we're looking forward to because this is our most anticipated games for the year. Which is always a fun conversation. And now, so we put a couple of little guidelines, which is like the games have to kind of have a release date at least. It can't be just like Marvel's Wolverine. Obviously, we're excited, but that we don't know when that's coming. So we left it off the list. It's got to at least probably be likely to have come out within the
Right, like,
next year, right?
I have a couple games that don't have an actual date, but,
Sure,
like,
sure.
they have been said to come out in 2022, and it seems reasonable. So yeah, like Wolverine, no. But and
Yeah.
like I didn't put Silksong on here as much as I wanted to because like no. So
The hopes are dying. The hopes are dying. But anyway, before we get into some of the more niche picks, I guess we should just, our plan is to kind of go over some of the more obvious and, ones we're going to be looking for, like, namely, number one, God of War Ragnarok. Like, PlayStation Podcast, obviously, God of War won. I think it was our number one game of all time on our list when we did that list. And obviously, with Ragnarok, knowing that that's going to be the end of the duality, which is the God of War series. They're not doing trilogy for that one. At least that's what they've said so far. Like, how can we not be waiting for that? Like, how is it going to end? What's going to happen to our boy Kratos? Like,
especially with
oh
the
my
way
God.
that the first one ends too. Like there are so many questions, and
Yeah,
we've been told we're going to all the realms. Like, yeah, that is an absolute no-brainer. Like I will cry when Ragnarok gets
I know.
gets into
I
my
know.
hands.
I really feel like it probably will be delayed. I know a lot of people are kind of
Yeah.
having that opinion. So whether or not it makes it this year or not, they're saying 2022 on the last I checked on any of the updates. And so that's kind of the last we've heard. And all we can do is sit here and wait and hope that we get to play that later this
Yeah.
year because,
Oh, I'm just excited. I'm almost as excited for when they're like, "Oh, there's a state of play in 2 days." It's the Ragnarok state of play.
oh, I
Like,
know.
I'm almost as excited for that as, like, actually playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So that's the first one for sure, and obviously we'll have a lot more to say about that. Another game I know we're gonna have a lot to say about coming up very shortly, or at least, at least you probably will. Maybe I will too. Who knows? Is Elden Ring, Kate? I know. What can you tell us
Yes.
about this?
At time of recording, we are 19 days away from Elden Ring. Well, at time of this being live for you guys, we will be at 18 days of until Elden Ring, and I have had a countdown on my phone like since it got a release date. And I will not bore you guys with all the details. There is zero speculation about how excited I am about this game. It is pre-ordered. I haven't pre-ordered a game in years, and I don't intend to pre-order games very often, but like I own Elden Ring. It's a Friday. I'm coming home from work. I'm staying in all weekend playing Elden Ring. Maybe I'll take Monday off. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah.
There's an outside chance I might pick it up because
Okay.
it's undoubtedly one of the biggest releases of the year, right? And
Mhm.
as much as I'm not drawn by the genre and all that too much, like with few exceptions, like the game itself is just so big and everything you're saying about it is exciting. And the
Mhm.
focus on exploration and all of that really speaks to like what I like about those games. And so, yeah, you never know, but we're definitely going to be talking about that game for at least a few episodes to come, I would imagine. So we'll get to that later on. Another one I think we agreed was one of the obvious picks was Forespoken, right?
Yes.
And that one I know, like I'm really high on that one for sure. I think it's such a cool concept that like taking someone from the modern day and putting them back in a different kind of more ancient setting, and the whole thing about I mean it's a Square Enix game as well, and I typically tend to like a lot of their stuff that's not Kingdom Hearts, and so I know this is one of the, I think it's the Final Fantasy 15 team that's working on this as well, and so I like that game just fine. Like I think it was a game that could have been improved, but it was all right. And so another go at what they could do with something adjacent to Final Fantasy in this new concept. I'm really looking forward to it. And games industry personality Gary Whitta, who I like to follow and seems to be, he knows his stuff. He's a writer as well, is working on it on the writing team as well. So it's another little bonus, I guess, for me personally.
Yeah, this one looks really neat. This I think out of all the ones we're excited for is the only one that is like next gen only, if I have my facts right. And like you can really see just everything they've shown off on this, right? Like Project Athia is how it
Hmm,
started
hmm.
out as that like amazing tech demo, and then we realized it's actually a game, and just watching the way everything flows and the visuals and the ray tracing, like it is just absolutely marvelous to look at, and it's not to say any of the other games aren't gorgeous because they are,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
this just looks like such an interesting, like, quote unquote "next gen" experience that I definitely have my eyes on it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I
yeah.
know like it's got the strong writing team that I
Mhm.
been a fan of for sure. So I think that it's going to be a good contender. I know you were a little bit lukewarm originally about the whole
Yeah,
presentation of it, but I think it may have grown on you a little bit or what?
I think maybe it's grown on me. I mean, I think the element stuff is awesome, like, that'll never not be cool
Yeah.
to do a lot of element-based things. The actual writing and the story and the character, like, I'm not opposed to it, and I like the idea conceptually, but, like, I don't know, just watching the trailer, it didn't grab me so much, but I am definitely not of a negative opinion, and I wanna see this game. I wanna see more of it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not my Elden Ring or Ragnarok, like, day one purchase,
Hey,
but it's definitely something I'm keeping an eye on.
sure. Yeah, me too. And I think I probably will be getting it unless we start getting a lot of news that it's, having a lot of problems or trouble or whatnot. But I'm pretty interested in that, especially being from the Final Fantasy 15 dev and all that stuff. But I think the last one we had on our list of too big to miss was the New Horizon Forbidden West. And it's an interesting place because I think we're both praising this game quite a bit, but I'm not sure either of us are actually going to play it right away just because we haven't played the first one to completion. And so I don't know if that's going to change for you between now and release, but I mean, we're pretty much there. So you'd have to really hustle.
Yeah, so this game comes out on the 18th, which of February, which is not an ideal place for it to come out. Even if I had beaten the first game, buying a new game on the 18th, which is 5 days before Elden Ring, is a bad decision in my book.
Yeah, for you, for sure.
Or I guess
for a lot of
7
people.
days. For 7 days, it's a week apart, but I hope that doesn't drag it down, that there's a lot of other things coming out in February. It's a really big month, actually.
Yeah. Well, Sifu just came out today, I think, as the day of recording as well. That's another, nowhere as big as those two, but still a notable release.
That game looked good too, but anyway, it's definitely like Horizon Forbidden West and Zero Dawn are games that are like inevitable in my mind. Like, I am going to play them. I have the first one. It is happening. It's just a matter of when. I just need to physically sit down and put the time into it because the world alone is enough for me on these games. And I've heard so many other good things. Like, I know Aloy is such a beloved character. They say she's so well written, and there's the combat looks really good. Like, there's a lot of things that this game has going for it, but just like the duality and the juxtaposition of nature and those like machine animals is enough for me that, like, if the game was like a romance game, like romance visual novel, I might still play it. Like, it's
still
so
worth
cool.
It. Yeah, it was cool. I mean, I remember I played 10, 15 hours of the first one and kind of fell off, but it's a cool world, and I mean, it's kind of a played out concept in a way. The whole like, our nature is actually infused with tech. Sort of, it's not like it's never been seen before, but the way they present it and the way it's kind of interwoven together with the story is cool. And I mean, there's a reason that game's so beloved, right? And it's kind of so praised. But we'll be talking about it soon, I'm sure. Whether it's one of us picking it up or a review roundup of sorts, we'll get to it on the show at some capacity. And we'll talk about it. Kate, what else are you looking forward to?
Okay, yeah. So we both came up with a list, and I've kind of just got mine in order of release date. So I'm gonna go that way instead of bias.
Sure.
My next one, it's another pretty big game, and it's very appropriate for what we've been talking about with February being a big month, but Destiny is getting its Witch Queen expansion on the 22nd.
Wow. And would you have ever thought that you'd be looking forward to that?
Would I have ever thought I'd be looking forward to this? Absolutely not. And I have a strong bias because, some friends have picked it up, and it's very much a social game for me. So would I buy Witch Queen on my own? Absolutely not. Would I buy Witch Queen because I know a bunch of people who are super excited about doing day one raids and
yes, you
talking about it? Yeah, maybe. So I don't think I'm getting it on the 22nd because, that's going to run into my Elden Ring time, and that's
right.
unfortunate.
Right.
And they tend to go on pretty good sales if you just kind of wait around a little bit. But I definitely have an eye on Witch Queen. It seems like they're adding some really cool areas, some really cool weapons. Like, a new raid is just the most exciting thing that a Destiny player could ever get. So.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, one of my best friends is a huge Destiny player. He's got a clan and has quite a standing in the clan and all that stuff. So I mean, I know it's a huge thing, and especially big for PlayStation too. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Destiny. We'll be talking about that on the news show next week. With Bungie and all that, but that's cool. I'm happy for you. And I'm going to say my first game I'm looking forward to in no specific order. I didn't list them by anything other than what I thought of. And I brought it up on the show before, but Metal Slug Tactics. Yes. Can we please get on the Metal Slug Tactics train? There's a lot of tactics games, and I even noted here, like, there's a lot of strategy games coming out soon. There's the Advance Wars Reboot Camp. There's Marvel Midnight Suns. There's Metal Slug Tactics. There's there's a few others that came out last year too. These games are making a renaissance of some kind. But Metal Slug Tactics looks great to me. It has that like GBA art style.
Yes, it really does.
It has the classic sort of Metal Slug look. I don't remember if you remember the trailer we saw for it, but there's kind of like those anime cutscenes with that awesome stylish music. I just love the vibe of this game.
It does that like cool like anime cut, and then it's like the person's face zoomed in close, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I just love the look and the feel of this game. It looks like it's tons of fun, and I love them when they reinvent franchises in a slightly different way. Like Metal Slug for sure, it's not one of the biggest franchises in gaming. It's never really has been, never will be, but it's a notable, like, people know Metal Slug. And whenever they can make a quality product that's like more than just a spin-off, and I think this game looks great. I mean, who's to say if it will be or not? But it's it's got the right teams on it. I think it's actually like an official product. It's made in affiliation with SNK, obviously. And so I just really hope it is what I want it to be. And if it is, I think I'll lose myself to quite a few hours of Metal Slug Tactics at some point this year.
That's awesome. It does generally look like a really good game. I didn't realize it was coming out so soon, so that's awesome.
Well, I think it's just listed, it's March 31st, right? So I don't know if that's a placeholder for like this quarter of the year. I don't know exactly how it works, but I think it'll be soon, if not the 31st.
Fingers crossed. That's awesome. My next game is one I think is like the one on my list that is a guaranteed we both have.
Okay, so, I know what it is too. Is it another strategy game?
It might be another strategy game. It's a strategy game, but it's got a really good shape involved with it.
Right.
March 4th, assuming it doesn't get any delays, is supposed to be Triangle Strategy.
Yeah.
And
See, another game.
I'm so glad they kept the name.
Yes.
Triangle Strategy.
Yeah.
This game, we both played the demo and we both fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
It looks so good. It's basically like if Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics meets like Divinity Original Sin 2, because there's like element manipulation you can play with. So if something's wet, then you throw some electricity on it and that's more powerful, or you can put fire out with water. And it's got that like grid-based tactics with all your different units that have unique classes and abilities. And then it also has some like crazy political, like social sim aspects to it, where like they've talked that up as a big part of the game is actually going to be making choices. And you do one in the tutorial, and it was a hard choice, if I remember correctly.
It was a hard choice, yeah.
Do you want to do the good guy route, or do you want to do the bad guy route? It was basically like, you're in a tough position. There's a few different options of how you can kind of deal with this conflict. What do you think is going to be the best outcome based off of the limited information you had?
Yeah.
And like, the coolest part to me about that was like, you had to choose as a character in the game, like the main character you are, but all the other characters had opinions. And so you could talk to them and like try to sway them one way or the other based off of what information you had. But also some of them just voted against you because that was their character and they just fundamentally disagreed. And that to me is so incredibly exciting. If they get that aspect of the game right, holy shit, is this going to be an S tier game for me?
I'm so there with you. I think this is, listeners will know we have some pretty different tastes a lot of the time in a lot of games, but I think this is like us with the handshake thing. We're like, yes, we both need to play this right away. It's exactly everything you said. You nailed it so hard. Like the way that it's not just a binary good or evil choice. Like it's one of those games. It reminds me a lot of the Banner Saga, like how you have to make a choice, but it's like, well, okay, this, the town is starving. Do we invest our money in food or do we grow more livestock? And there's like, whatever you think is the better way to do it, there could be a consequence. You're not sure. And even if you are sure, you don't know if everyone's going to vote for you. And so it seems like if they nail that, you're right, because the combat seems really solid. As long as it doesn't do like I know Octopath Traveler was a good example of this for me, where it's like, it is fun, but eventually it gets like way too of like that RPG like difficulty spike in terms of like we were talking about grinding with Dragon Quest. I just hope it doesn't go there, but as long as it lands its balance in terms of the combat and then the social aspects being like what we want them to be in terms of like that balance of influence, but not like 100% control. That seems like it's going to be like a game of the year contender for both of us, I would say. And the question for you, like I'm buying this like day one for sure when it comes out. I hope you're doing the same. I hope it can get you away from Elden Ring. We'll see.
We'll see.
Need a palate cleanser.
You know what? The other thing too is I want a good reason to play my Switch. I haven't played my Switch much
Yeah.
recently, and like I want to bring that bad boy out again, but it's March 4th. It's tough. We'll see how
Look,
it goes.
I'll lend you my Donkey Kong. You can cram that in. It's only like,
Okay.
6 or 7 hours. Then you can warm the Switch up, and then after you play some Elden Ring, get your fill, you can triangle strategy. It'll be perfect.
This is absolutely a plan. But tell me another game you're excited about and sway me on this ever-growing list that never seems to get shorter.
I know, it really doesn't. Well, I mean, yeah, triangle strategy was on my list too, so I'm glad you brought that one up. Why not just go right into another strategy game, because that's what all we're talking about this year again. Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, or Ubisoft Montreal Sparks of Hope, or I do a bad French accent, but this is the kind of thing. I think I said it before. I don't know if we've actually really talked about this game on the show, but man, I never thought I would like any property that had Rabbids in it, and I do. I really strongly do. This game is a surprise. Like, Mario uses guns. Luigi has like a sniper rifle. It's very strange. It reminds me of do you remember Shadow the Hedgehog back on GameCube? It's like where he rode a motorcycle and had like a handgun or something. And
it was so, went through that weird emo phase. Yeah, I have the exact same sentiment. Like, that game is way better than it has any business being, right? Like, that is a good game. Not only is that a good game, like, it's a good game despite having Rabbids, and it's a good game, like, without having to play into the Mario aspect. Like,
I didn't even hate the Rabbids, though. That's the thing. Like, I didn't hate them.
They were surprisingly not bad.
They weren't great, but,
I found other aspects of the game really funny. I don't think I ever ended up liking any of the Rabbids characters, but some of the worlds that were created with them were quite cute and charming. It was just a good game in its own right. It was so creative. The boss fights were neat, like how they used the terrain, how you could like jump off of other characters' heads to get like movement boosts and stuff. Like, it had a lot of stuff going on, that it wasn't just like, let's make a turn-based combat game using Mario. It was like, we've made this really unique, cool turn-based combat strategy game, and Mario just kind of happens to be there. Like, he wasn't necessary to sell it. He just
not at all.
Not at all. Like, yeah, that is a good one.
It's a great game, and so a lot of maybe some Switch is going to be coming out this year, like more Switch than last year, and some more. Who knows? Maybe it'll be different.
I think I'm out of Switch games, unfortunately, but I do have another game for you now. This one also super relevant. Mentioned at the top of the show. This is my last game that has an actual release date, and it's March 25th. We're getting Ghostwire Tokyo.
Yes, we just saw gameplay of that too.
We just saw some gameplay. It got its own big trailer and breakdown, and the studio got interviewed, and they just seem like a wonderful group of people. So I guess we'll talk more in depth on that in our next news episode. But holy shit, I always knew that Ghostwire Tokyo was a game I had my eyes on, and I am only getting more excited every time they show it. It just seems like such a weird, cerebral, paranormal world that is nothing like I've ever seen before. Like, it's very much that Okami, Japanese spirit world kind of stuff, but it's set in Tokyo. And from what the developers were talking about, it seems like they did a really faithful imagining of Tokyo, and then just threw a bunch of paranormal shit on top of it.
That's always good, though, like, it's they are trying to get the real place, because I think it really adds something to people who are also like from there or who have been there, and they can see like, oh my god, that's the street, like I go to work down there, like, that's
absolutely.
cool.
And that is one of the coolest things. And so in like a lot of Western gaming, we don't typically tend to get this aesthetic very much. Like, we do get Japanese stuff, but it's typically more like Ghost of Tsushima or Sekiro, or like samurai kind of Japanese inspired thing. We don't get a lot of the really like mystical and like mythical side. So I was excited enough just based off of that to have a really cool new world. But it seems so cool. Like, the combat to me looks very like almost like BioShock inspired, where you've got these powers and the elements, and like you're using these like magical threads, and then you're like manipulating objects, and it just seems like really, really weird, but in the best way possible. And I just want to like tinfoil hat this game and like try to figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah, I think it looks like all those things too. My biggest takeaway, I guess we'll probably talk about it more again on the news show, is like I thought it looked quite Dishonored like, except maybe more focused on combat than like Dishonored. I feel like pushes you more towards stealth, and like it kind of wants you to be stealth, whereas this I feel like is more like you can kill by stealth if you want, but these moves are fucking cool and you want to KO some guys with them. Basically,
absolutely.
Basically, yeah, that's a good shout though. I think Ghostwire was pretty cool. My next one I'll shout out. I got a couple Devolver games in a row here, and I'll out first Card Shark, and I don't remember if you remember seeing this. I think it was like in Nintendo Indie World or something last year, but it's a game. It's from the developer of Reigns. You know, like that. It's like a card game on your phone where you kind of swipe yes or right or left depending on like what choice you want to make. Political decisions, and then so this is their next game, and it's a game about like counting cards and cheating in cards. And I guess it's the whole premise of it is that it takes place in like 18th century France, and you're trying to gain political power and like, I don't know, you're trying to gain some kind of noteworthiness, I guess, in that type of setting, but you're doing it by gambling essentially, but you're not really gambling, you're cheating, and you're trying not to get caught. And so beyond that, I don't think they really outlined too much of how the mechanics work, but I think this is a cool little premise for a game, and I always like kind of unique stuff that's never really been done, I think. And this is something that I can't really think that's been done before, like a cheating card game. So it seems cool. And if it's anything like Reigns, it should be pretty simple to play, but hard to kind of get all the way through and see everything. So I'm hoping for something along those lines. And I'm hoping that it comes out this year too, because I also don't think it has a firm release date.
No, I think it's just release date, like a nebulous 2022. But yeah, this game looked cool. It was also gorgeous. Like it has a neat, kind of French painted art style.
It's certainly a step up from Reigns, like what that was. That was clearly like that's a mobile game where, I mean, it was a good one, but it was a mobile game. Whereas this looks more like, okay, let's step it up a little bit and make like more of a lower end-ish console type of look.
This is 100% the kind of game where like I would like it on mobile though. Like I could see myself playing this on the train or something, right? Because like it just seems really like short, bite-sized, and kind of like what Reigns was like. In that terms of like gameplay style. So like I want to play this on the train. It looks just lovely.
Maybe it's a Switch. Maybe it's the Switch again.
Maybe it's a Switch again.
How many more you got on your list there, Kate? I got two left. Two left myself.
Okay, I've got 3 left. So I'll hit you with one and we'll go back and forth. I can give you another. I believe it's also Devolver, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So it is called Cult of the Lamb.
This was in consideration to be on my list, surprisingly.
Okay, yeah. It's the developer is Massive Monster, but it's being published by Devolver. And this game, it reminds me a lot. The playstyle looks kind of like Death's Door to me, where it's a very like artistic, stylized kind of like top-down action game where you've got, like various weapons, maybe some magic, a roll, a sword, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it is just like the premise is you're this little lamb and you've like started your own cult. And like it's really weird and dark, but done in like the most cutest, like little chibi almost aesthetic. And
it had a really hectic kind of trailer, right? With like some silly music and all that stuff.
Trailer. Yeah, it reminded me a lot of like Death's Door kind of style gameplay, and you do like most of that dungeon crawling and boss fights and stuff, but then you also have a little like town management aspect where like I guess you bring all these people you've like conditioned to be in your cult back to your town and you gotta like decide what kind of buildings to put up for them and stuff. So it just looks like bombastic and hilarious, but also looks like a really fun, polished game at the same time.
It's quite a combination. Looks good. Yeah. My next one, the other Devolver game I wanted to bring up was Weird West. And this is a game, it's published by Devolver, but it's from Wolf Eye Studios. I think it's actually their first game. But this game just looks really interesting to me, and it's not something that usually draws me in. It's sort of like a twin stick action type of game, and it takes place in the Wild West, but as you can see in the title, Weird West, some weird shit happens, and it's kind of got like a little bit of a horror vibe. It's a little supernatural, and it's got some, like, you're basically working your way through different levels, but you can get a ton of different powers. Like in the trailer they show, you can be in like a tornado, and you can have all these different sort of things you can morph into, like a werewolf, and you can sneak around or in stealth guys, or kind of run through walls and take them out with these different abilities you gather. Like there's just a lot of variety, and it looks like a very interesting game, and whether or not it all works and comes together is kind of remains to be seen. But I know that from what I've seen, it looks like an interesting concept, and it just looks like a lot of fun to be in somewhere like a Western world, honestly, because you don't get to go to those types of locations a whole lot if you don't want to play, I guess, Red Dead Redemption, right?
Yeah, that's fair. There was like a Western underworld game that came
Oh,
out
West of Dead.
recently.
West of Dead,
Is it West of
maybe?
Dead?
Maybe?
Maybe? That sounds kind of right. Yeah, West of Dead, that's right. It
Yeah.
kind of looks like that to me a bit. I played a little bit of that game and it was really fun.
Yeah, I
Um
think this one's more action focused than that, or I don't remember. But either way, this game looks good to
mhm.
me. I would like to check it out. And Devolver, like I mean, I think Devolver is always a quality, like, push in the right direction if you think if something will be good. If
Yeah.
it's from Devolver, I feel like more often than not you get what you're looking for. So it kind of pushes it up. Like if this was being published by some other, group I've never really heard of, it might not be so exciting. But I think that kind of puts it in the right column.
Yeah, agreed. They put a lot of love into their games. They always make weird stuff, but it's always good.
They're weird, yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I've got two more for you. This is another unannounced date, but it's set to come out 2022, and this is the new Plague Tale Requiem.
Ooh, I wondered if you'd put this on your list. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've talked about in the past, Plague Tale has only risen so highly in my mind. Like when we do that next reevaluation of our top games, like Plague Tale is making a strong
Right, right.
commentary for itself. And I am so excited to see how they've reiterated on the formula and just kind of there were some cracks for sure in the first game, but the writing and the story and the world was just phenomenal for me. And the more I think about this game, the more I've just fallen in love with it. And so for it to get a sequel to kind of, catch up with everyone, see how they're doing, what's new for these characters, and then also maybe just to shore up some of the cracks in the gameplay, like holy shit, like this
Mm,
this genuinely is maybe aside from Ghostwire, the one I'm most looking forward to, not
wow.
counting the obvious games.
Right, yeah. Wow, that's high praise. Are you gonna be day one on
Mm.
that, do you think? Depending what you're playing, I guess, or
It depends. It
yeah,
always depends what I'm playing.
sure.
My brain always wants to be day oneing on
Yeah,
all these games, but, there's
right.
no point buying
But
it
other
and
things
letting
get
it
in the
just
way.
sit
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's a good call. I think that, yeah, we'll have an interesting conversation about that when it comes out, and during our top games list as well, because as people will know, we have maybe some slightly differing opinions on the first one, but interesting nonetheless.
Yeah.
So my last game on my list, and this is one that I wasn't sure if you were going to have, but for me, it's like right up there along the very top of what I'm most looking forward to, but it's Marvel's Midnight Suns. Man,
Yes.
this game, it's supposed to just be, I think it's like Q3, Q4 2022. So hopefully it just kind of squeaks in the fall, or, early winter, I guess, before New Year. But man, you know what? To have a new Marvel game that's like squad based and not, the online kind of Avengers Crystal Dynamics game, which is like the whole live service thing. Like this game, to me, being a strategy game from the people that made, what's like XCOM, right? And there's
Mhm.
such a perfect little marriage of skill sets, because Marvel has interesting characters that all have unique abilities and relationships with each other. Put that on top of a tactical role-playing game, like they can make it Fire Axis. Because I really enjoyed XCOM. Like I tried to get into it a couple times, right?
Mhm.
And the gameplay's fun, but I know you're kind of like me, where you get put off by like that harsh military sort of setting. And to me, if they can make a game with sort of that quality of the tactics and the depth of what the tactics are like in those games, but make
Mhm.
it Marvel, and then add on top of it sort of the story, the choices you can make, and the ability to make your own Marvel hero. And I know there's like a card system as well, where you get sort of abilities for different missions. It just seems like there would be so much there, and they've got such a well of characters. Like there's a nice mix of some more niche characters, I guess, and then you also have Iron Man and Wolverine and the standards. But it just seems so cool, and the Metallica song in that trailer, I'm just like, oh
Yes.
yes, give me Marvel's Midnight Suns and let me play that game.
Yeah.
Hopefully this year.
Yeah, Midnight Suns looks incredibly cool. I didn't think it was coming out in 2022, so I overlooked that.
Well, I might not be, but that's what they're saying
But
right now, so that's why it's on my list.
that game looks incredible, and the best part of that trailer was the Metallica song. It was so good.
Yeah, I don't know if that says good
Um,
things about the game, if the best part is the song in
I
the trailer, but we didn't really see too much of the game, honestly, like really
Yeah,
anything. So,
that's true. The aesthetic was
yeah.
good too, so it had a lot going for it. But you know what does music even better
Oh,
than
please tell me.
Midnight Suns?
Please tell
Okay,
me.
this is I may have be lied about the Plague Tale thing, saying it was the second. It might be third because I remembered I put to close out my list Metal Hellsinger, and
Oh
holy
yeah, Metal
shit,
Hellsinger.
apparently it's coming 2022. I am so excited about this game. So basically it's like a Doom style shooter, which does not say Katie at all, right? Like that is not a game you'd normally associate with me. But this one is a rhythm game at the same time. And I think it's so incredibly creative because it's so true when you're playing like fast-paced action games, you do just sort of get into a rhythm, right? Like you'll kind of bop your head or tap your toes, or at least I will. Like I'll get really into the music. Like it adds a lot to me. So this game is, and the developer is really interesting. The Outsiders, I believe, is what they're called. They kind of said this is like just such a logical or like continuation of that idea, and they're
And it
like,
is.
honestly,
It
we're
is.
shocked no one else has done this before. And so you're doing this doom style shooting, but you have to shoot on beat, and the music like ramps up as you go, and it just looks like such a fun evening to sit down and just feel like an absolute badass. And it doesn't come up very often, but I'm a really big metal fan, so that's obviously doing tons for me. And they've got some big bands for this game, like Lamb of God's gonna be there, Trivium, Soilwork, Arch Enemy. And my personal favorite poet, I actually have tickets to go see in April, and I'm hella excited, is Ginger's gonna be there, or at least the main singer of Ginger. And if you haven't ever heard Ginger, holy shit, look that band
Man, I
up.
gotta look them up. I really
Oh,
do,
I
because
think I maybe sent you them before,
you
but
probably
anyway,
did. Yeah.
you'll know when you hear it. But I'll ruin the surprise for everyone. Ginger has a female singer, and I've never heard anyone with that range. She goes from like the beautifulest, highest, most delicate notes to like the lowest amazing screaming, and like
Wow.
she's just an
Okay,
absolute legend.
I'm
So
looking it up
she's
after
gonna be
this.
in the game. Like there's just so many good bands all coming together to make this work. And like I've seen online that they say this is gonna blow out, like, all the other music games, like, goodbye Dance Dance Revolution, goodbye Parappa the Rappa, we got Metal Hellsinger now.
Yeah. Well, move over Parappa. Yeah, move over
Over
Patapon.
Parappa, that's right.
And yeah, you know what? I didn't even remember that game, honestly. We've talked about it on the show a few times, but
Yeah,
I'm excited for that too, if not only for the soundtrack. Just
yeah.
having something to do while listening to those music or those bands is fantastic. Nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just so excited to play games this year, like
Man,
there's an
2022 is
abundance.
such a good year for
And
gaming, like,
there's
we
going to be
gotta quit
so
our
much
jobs,
stuff too.
man.
There's going to be so much stuff we don't know about too. Like all the stuff you got to
Yeah.
think that would have probably come out like last year or at least been announced that's been delayed. Like there's going to be a lot of stuff that we
Yeah,
don't even know about
I
now.
feel like by the time March is over, there's already, like, a huge handful of new games that, like, I'm gonna be trying not to buy because they're so
Yeah.
exciting, and that's, like, just, like, 3 months. 2022 is gonna be insane.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be good. But we'll talk about that on future shows because we have to end this one out for the day, Kate. But before we do, we of course have a listener mail question to end the show with. And like we said at the top of the show, you can write in to be part of listener mail if you want to get in touch with us at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com or on Twitter, wherever we post our, the links there. You can just send us a message, ask us a question, tell a story, whatever you want. Just like our writer today did, Kate. And do you want to read the message we got from I think it's not their real name. It's Big Mike'sicle 420 back again, but
I mean, why go by anything else is what I have to say. But yes, he says, "Hello, R1s and L1s. Longtime listener, first time writing in a question. What is a remaster you think is worse than the original, and what is a remake you think revived a dead franchise? Please note the difference between remaster and remake. Would absolutely adore your take on this. In brackets, no Final Fantasy VII remake." Yours truly, Big Mike'sicle 420.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Final Fantasy VII people already like it anyway, so remake a dead franchise, like that's not dead anyway. Come on, wouldn't be a good answer. But it's hard to think about. Like for me, there was a lot of remakes that I thought did a good job to bring things back. But when it came to like the remasters that were worse than the original, I found that hard to think of. Like usually these games get better when they get remastered, you know, or at least the ones that I've played.
Yeah, that one's tough for me too because I feel like there aren't very many games I've played both of as well. Like I know when Demon Souls came out and like obviously Bluepoint did an absolutely incredible job. Like that game is runs flawlessly. It looks amazing and it was really faithful to the original game, but I guess they with the way that the lighting works, some people feel like the atmosphere is slightly shifted in some of the areas and they're like, "Oh, it's so much worse than the original one because it's just slightly different."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so like that's so specific though, like, I don't think I'm familiar with very many games that, like, I'm so intimately knowledgeable about the first one and then also played
Yeah, right.
the
Because
remaster
most of the time for
remake.
me, it's like I buy the remaster of games that I missed the first time around. So that
Yeah.
or it's a game that I really enjoyed the first time, and then so I want to play the remaster, but they're both good, and I wouldn't say that it was like improving on something that really needed
Mhm.
it more so than I was buying something I just wanted to experience again. But we'll try our
Yeah.
best to answer the question in the vein of what it was.
Mhm.
And I can answer easily for the remake that I think revived a dead franchise, and you can maybe
Okay.
argue with me if it was dead or not, but I really think that Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS revived Metroid as a dead series because we hadn't had a Metroid game that had come out in like years and years. It had been so long, really, for anything of consequence for Metroid. And then Mercury
Mhm.
Steam, the team that worked on Samus Returns, they did, you know, a relatively good job for what they were expecting to get. The reviews were pretty good, and then Mercury Steam was given the opportunity to work on Metroid Dread after the fact. So the fact that I think that they did so well with Returns and you know, made a quality product, then gave them the green light to go ahead and do original work, which was not a remake, and Dread was fantastic last
Mhm.
year. And so I think it really revived Metroid. And now we have, of course, all the rumors of, well, I guess the Metroid Prime rumors and stuff were going on before, but I mean, now people are, I think, are probably talking about it more just because Metroid's back kind of in the discussion again because of Dread. So
Mhm.
I would say, yeah, Metroid Samus Returns. And I think that was in 2017 or something that came out. I didn't write down a date, but maybe I'll look it up while you give us your answer.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. I tried to think of ones that I had played and,
Yeah,
also something
2017.
like
2017.
I that's nice. Yeah, I kinda went with, the Crash Bandicoot one that was sitting on my
Hmm.
shelf, and maybe I was slightly biased because I, you know, was sitting right there and I just unpacked it,
I knew
but
there was a reason you brought this up this episode.
I mean, it's one of the ones that it's one of the rare ones that I have played both, the original and the new one, and I love it. Like, I wasn't super intimate with the first one, so maybe there's certain things that people preferred, but, like, I just think it's so wonderful, and I really think it did a good job to bring Crash back into, like, the discussion. Like,
Hmm.
you know, there is, like, Out of Time, like, we finally got Crash 4, right? And, like, all the taglines on that game were, like, joking around about how long it's been
Yeah,
to
finally
finally have
back.
this game come out, right? And, like, I don't think that game would have come out if the, like, trilogy did not do well.
Totally. It's
It
yeah, you're 100% right, I think. And you're right. That game was great. That's a good answer. Have you played the fourth one or do you want to play it?
I haven't yet. I haven't finished the trilogy yet.
Mm.
So I think once I eventually do, it's kind of one of those games where like I just throw it on for like an hour at a time every now and again when I
See how
just
far
want
you
something
get.
chill. It's like, oh, I've got an hour in the morning while I have my coffee before I've got to do something. I'll just throw that on and just kind of chill with
Relax
it.
and play
So
some Crash,
I'm
yeah.
kind of like slowly going through it, or like, yeah, it's kind of fun to throw on if a friend's over and like we'll pass the controller back and forth and stuff. So
Mhm.
I think eventually like, 4 is a game I'd wanna play. I see it maybe being, like, a great PS Plus game for
That
for
would be
one
nice.
month.
That would be really nice.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
eventually I definitely do have some interest.
That's cool. The I had one other quick shout out for this one, and it's not it wasn't my answer because it's just a remaster, not a full remake. But I really think the Mass Effect trilogy coming out last year really
Mhm.
breathed some life into Mass Effect. Not that I thought it was dead, but I mean, people really didn't like Andromeda, and I think it made
Mhm.
everyone kind of like, instead of being totally excited for whatever the new Mass Effect game is, the conversation is not like, oh, we can't wait. It's, oh, I hope it's not like Andromeda, and I hope it's better. So the fact that the trilogy came out and it was remastered and fixed a lot of the, you know, some of the shit with the Mako and all that, even though it wasn't perfect, I think it like at least turned that conversation around back to like Mass Effect is good. And
Right, it reminds
yeah,
everyone why they love the franchise, not
exactly.
just
exactly.
where
But it's a
where it's
remaster, so
for.
it didn't count in the terms of the question. But in terms of remasters that are worse than the originals, this was the tough part for me. And I will admit, I kind of copped out a little bit on my answer because I've not played any of these, but it's just kind of what I've observed throughout the last little bit. Just because I've talked about it before, I'm hoping to play every Final Fantasy game at some point, like go back through, and maybe not like the very original ones, but like in terms of like Final Fantasy 5 and 6. And even 4, I know that they're available on like a ton of platforms these days, but I know like so many of the remasters and like the ports on Steam and like mobile and whatnot, there's like such a variety of them, and so many of them apparently are just not good, whether they use like different fonts or have different graphics to change around, or just they don't run the way they're supposed to. And I don't know how much of that is like people just kind of complaining online and being like, oh, the Super Nintendo one's the best and fuck you and all and whatever. But at the same time, it's like, the games were great in their original form, and so I hope that they're not like, they hope they aren't all dramatically that much worse, because eventually I would like to play them in some modern form. So yeah, got to dig through kind of the crap to get to the good versions of those. But apparently there's some pretty shoddy remasters in the classic Final Fantasy realm, so I'll go with that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. This is a tough one for me as well because I haven't played many, and the ones I have played have been good. So this one, the most personal I can get with this is the Super Mario 3D All Stars collection that they made for
Right.
Switch. I was really looking forward to it, and I was going to pick it up, but I read really bad reviews. And basically just people saying that like they were like shitty emulations of the games, and some of them didn't run very well. And I know there's a lot of issues, especially with 64, saying that they like patched some of the things that were like, yeah, technically were like glitches, but were very like core to like speedrunning and how things like worked in the game. And so a lot of people were upset that that was a very like quintessential part of the game, and they don't understand why that would be
Yeah, yeah.
like, quote unquote fixed,
Right.
because it was like a like a legacy element at this point. And just apparently they don't run the smoothest, and they were overall quite disappointing. So I never ended up picking up the collection, which was sad because I missed Sunshine and Galaxy. And so, like, I loved Super Mario 64 and I've loved Odyssey, but I've sort of missed the ones in the middle. And I was looking forward to this as being like a convenient way to play them because, yeah, as we reiterate all the time, Nintendo's not always the easiest to get some of their older
No, not at
games
all.
going. But yeah, I ended up skipping this one for some bad reviews. So
Damn, it's a bummer
it's
too.
kind of a bummer.
That story
Yeah.
reminds me a lot of the Halo Master Chief collection. Also, like, it's another game I
Mhm.
haven't played. I played it like one time last year, but apparently that game was just like a nightmare when it was supposed to be a collection of all the older Halos. And it's like, to some extent, it's kind of weird. Like, how come Nintendo doesn't do a proper job of emulating their own game? It's kind of like that story of the Super Nintendo in our last
Yeah.
news show. It's like, why would he have to use a bootleg emulator? Like, why don't they have something built in on Nintendo's own platform to do that? It's kind of weird, but I guess there's a reason. I guess that's the way it is. But I'm sorry you didn't get to play your Mario games, and yeah, that's too bad. But maybe good you didn't use your money if you didn't like what they did.
Maybe I can buy some of these new games coming out. Maybe
Yeah.
it'll be Triangle Strategy instead.
That's right. Yeah,
Bye, Mario. We're
that's the
playing
plan.
Triangle
That's the
Strategy.
plan. Well, thank you for your question, Big Mike'sicle 420, and thank you all to listening to the show today. We really appreciate it as always. But I think that's going to wrap us up for today. So we're going to get on out of here, and we'll see everyone again in the end of next Monday, I guess, for our news show, where we'll be talking about, that Ghostwire Tokyo news, the Gran Turismo state of play that just happened, and we'll be talking all about PlayStation buying a little company called Bungie as well, and what that will mean going forward. So look forward to that on Monday's show, and we'll see you all on the next one.